Manius Valerius Maximus Corvinus Messalla, Consul 263 B.C.E., Censor 252 B.C.E. Marcus Valerius Maximus Corvinus was the son and grandson of Roman consuls and the scion of one of Rome's most distinguished patrician families. His actions during the First Punic War show that he was someone who possessed great ability, and it was during that very conflict where he got the public stage that he needed to demonstrate his considerable talents. In 263 BCE, Valerius was elected patrician consul, with Manius Atticilius Crassus as his plebeian colleague. In 263, Rome decided to capitalize on the success of Appius Claudius Caldex's campaign and sent both of its new consuls to Sicily with full armies of 20,000 men, thus giving them a combined total of 40,000 men. This must have been a great relief to Atticilius, since otherwise the Senate would have surely sent his patrician colleague if they had been forced to choose between the two men. The primary goal of the campaign was to neutralize Hiero and the Syracusans, since they seemed to be the bigger threat than the Carthaginians who dominated the western side of the island. Immediately upon the arrival of the two new consuls, Sicilian cities began to weigh their options and decide which of the three factions they would side with. At that moment, the Romans with their 40,000-man force were a clear and present danger to any city not aligned with Rome. So, according to Diodorus Siculus, 67 cities joined the Roman cause without a fight. With a clear path from Messana, provisions being supplied by their new local allies, and a large enough force to invest the large and heavily fortified city of Syracuse, Valerius and Atticilius decided to march straight to the heart of the strongest Greek polis in the west. When they arrived on the frontier of Syracuse's territory, the Romans quickly stormed one of the frontier fortresses and seemed to have made quite an impression on Hiero. Hiero II of Syracuse in 263 was still aligned with the Carthaginians, who had promised to send a relief force if and when the Romans laid siege to Syracuse. In addition, the Romans as of yet lacked a fleet which was the equal of the Syracusan fleet, and they could by no means blockade the city's harbor to starve it out. Like any Syracusan patriot, Hiero was no doubt aware of how formidable his native city was to any would-be besieger, and he knew that even the great Athenian expedition of 415 BCE had fallen short in the end. Nonetheless, Hiero was a tyrant, and like every dictator in history, his first concern was to remain dictator. With that end in mind, Hiero wanted to avoid a painful siege which could generate dissatisfaction with his leadership. We must also consider that the long history of strife between Syracuse and Carthage most likely made Hiero think it unwise to rely too heavily upon Carthaginian assistance. To the possible surprise of the two Roman consuls, Hiero actually opened negotiations with them when they entered his territory. For Atticilius and Valerius, Hiero's willingness to become an ally of Rome was little less than a godsend, as with their lack of a viable fleet, their efforts to take Syracuse by siege would have been in vain, and such an operation would leave them vulnerable to the Carthaginians while also lessening the fear that the other cities of Sicily would have for Rome, and increasing the probability of revolts breaking out. It is not clear how long the negotiations took or how hard of a line either side took, but it seems that because peace between Rome and Syracuse suited the interest of Hiero and the two consuls so neatly, that the process was smooth and rapid. Hiero agreed to release all of his Roman prisoners, and he may have led off the negotiations with this gesture to establish goodwill with the consuls. As an ally of Rome, Hiero promised to aid Roman operations in Sicily with logistical and military aid, thus resolving Rome's supply problems that stemmed from a lack of a fleet to connect the four legions in Sicily with Italy. In exchange, Rome legitimated Hiero by recognizing him as a king, and recognizing his right to rule over the cities of Acre, Leontini, Megara, Netum, and Halorum, all of which formed a kind of semicircular perimeter around Syracuse. The Romans even went so far as to return the city of Tauromenium on a high plain between Messana and Catana. Hiero's position as the ruler of Syracuse was now fully secure, and unlike his predecessors, he was not forced to worry about the proverbial sword of Damocles for the rest of his life. While it may seem like Hiero got the better end of the deal, in the long run, the Romans clearly benefited more than their new Greek ally. For the duration of the First Punic War, which would rage on until 241, Hiero would prove to be a loyal ally and provide crucial supplies of Roman forces, even during periods when Rome was at a low ebb and Hiero could have struck out on his own or sided with Carthage and attempted to oust the Romans. In fact, Hiero would remain loyal to the Romans for the remaining 48 years of his long life, which only ended in 215 B.C.E. This, of course, also means that the negotiations of Valerius and Atticius in 263 were effective enough to keep Hiero loyal even after Lake Trasimene and Cannae, two of the worst land disasters in Roman history some decades later. One could plausibly argue that the negotiations of 263 were more important than any single battle fought during the entirety of the First Punic War, because of the long-reaching and positive impact that this alliance had on the course of Roman history. The negotiations were initiated and concluded at an ideal time for the Romans, as the Carthaginians had almost assembled their relief force in time to intervene. However, when they heard that Hiero was talking with the Romans, the Carthaginian commander decided that Hiero was a faithless ally and decided to preserve his mercenary force for other operations. There's a very high probability that this was the force that Hannibal commanded the following year at Agrigentum. Valerius received almost the entirety of the credit for Rome's success in Sicily, and the Senate lavished rewards upon him. He was granted a triumph over the Carthaginians and King Hiero of Syracuse, an honor that he was not forced to share with his colleague. In addition, he earned the cognomen Messalla in recognition for the safety that he delivered to the Mamertines of Messana, Rome's other new ally. The newly minted Messalla was also the first Roman to receive the privilege of having a battle scene fresco made in his honor placed in the Senate House. This fresco seems to be a gift from the Mamertines, and also may have been the first commemorative fresco dedicated in the city of Rome. The fresco on your screen is the famous one from Pompeii, featuring Alexander attacking Darius III. By that date, a few centuries later, these frescoes had become very commonplace, but that trend all began with Valerius. Valerius Messalla was also the first Roman to introduce a sundial into the city, although it is not clear whether he did this as part of his triumphal celebration or at some later date. In addition to receiving one of the best attested and impressive triumphs of his time, Valerius also achieved the high honor of holding the censorship in 252 BCE. While the censorship is a high honor, it is normally uneventful, and we don't hear of censors doing anything more than their routine job of ousting unworthy individuals from the Senate and equestrian order. Valerius, however, proved noteworthy as he demoted 400 people from the equestrian order for their failure to perform military duty in Sicily. This action undoubtedly helped to further cement his reputation as a true Roman with a dedication to duty. Nonetheless, Manius Valerius Maximus Corvinus Messalla's place in history was earned in 263 when he successfully negotiated arguably the most important alliance in Roman history and set Rome on what could have and should have been an easy path forward to victory in the First Punic War.